Hey guys, welcome back to another impressions or review video. This time I'm going to be talking about one of my most anticipated games of 2013, and that game is Bioshock Infinite. This is the PlayStation 3 version, and I'm using the alternate cover that the game provided. And yeah, I just beat the game last night, so I thought I'd share my impressions. And I want to start the video by saying that this is going to be a spoiler-free review or impressions video. So don't worry if you haven't beaten the game yet. You can just listen with no problem. And where do I start with this game? I'm going to start by saying that I'm a huge fan of the Bioshock series in general. Bioshock, the first Bioshock game, in my opinion, is one of the best, if not the best, game of the generation, of this generation of gaming. And I do have to say that Bioshock 2, I know a lot of people didn't like the game, but to me it's almost as good as the first one. I still hold the first one as the pinnacle of the series, but I thought Bioshock 2 was a terrific game. Just an awesome way to revisit Rapture again. So it was only natural that I was looking forward with a lot of anticipation towards Bioshock Infinite, and I have to say that the game did not disappoint me at all. The game delivered, and it's gonna be up there with Game of the Year contender. And I'm not surprised that a lot of the gaming publications are giving this game, high 90s, and even some of the review scores are perfect. So let's start. I'm going to do a lot of comparisons between the previous Bioshock games and this one, just because the games are similar in some aspects and not very similar in others. So I'm just going to start briefly by talking about the graphics, the soundtrack, and the gameplay mechanics. The game looks good. The PlayStation 3 versions runs pretty well. So I was happy to know that, because some of the multi-platform games like Skyrim, for example, they run pretty good on the 360, but they run like crap on the PlayStation 3. But Bioshock Infinite runs smooth on the PlayStation 3. The graphics are really good in this game. Nothing earth-shattering. There's not going to be like a next-gen graphics type of quality like the Uncharted games, but the graphics are good enough to make the experience enjoyable. But what really separates this game in terms of the graphics department, if you will, is the art direction and the attention to detail. When you're exploring Colombia, the city in the sky, the environments are so vivid and colorful. They're full of life. They're full of detail. They really make you feel like you're in the city of Colombia, with the amount of detail and just the overall art direction. It gives the game has this old school vibe that in a way it takes you back to the early 1900s, which is where the game takes place. Some minor screen tearing, some dips in frame rate here and there, but nothing that's gonna affect the enjoyment out of this game. Soundtrack is amazing, really good orchestral pieces while you're fighting the enemies and whatnot. But let's just get started with the story. I'm just gonna briefly tell a little bit of a summary of the story without spoiling anything. The story is about this guy right here, Booker DeWitt, which is the character that you control, and you basically have to go up to this city in the sky called Colombia to rescue this girl, and you have to bring her alive down to the surface to this individual that asks you to do that, in exchange to wiping out your debt, because as it turns out, your character Booker DeWitt, he's addicted to like gambling and stuff, and he has a major debt. So in order to wipe out his debt, he accepts this mission to go to Colombia, bring the girl back, and get all his debt clean. So when you go to Colombia, one of the first things that I really wanted to experience in this game was that first time you explore the city, which in the first Bioshock game was, in my opinion, like the pinnacle moment of the game. For when you first go down the bathysphere and you see the underwater, city of Rapture for the very first time. My mind was completely blown back in the day. When I saw that Art Deco architecture with like the neon signs underneath the ocean, it was really like a unforgettable moment in my opinion. And I was a little bit scared with Bioshock Infinite because you already what to expect. You're gonna go to this fantasy city up in the sky. But I have to say that the game impressed me. At the very beginning of the game, when you go up to Colombia, that scene, it just gave me that same reminder of the epicness of going to Rapture for the first time. So they did a very, very good job of capturing that wow moment when you arrive in Colombia. And the really cool thing about Colombia is that it's a little bit the opposite of what Rapture was in the first Bioshock. Rapture was this forsaken city that it's completely run down, and it's almost like an eerie place to be in. Whereas Colombia, when you first arrive, the city is colorful, it's vivid, it's full of life. People are not hostile to you. When you get to Colombia, you're free to walk to the city, you're free to talk to the people, you're free to interact, you're free to enter, the shops, you're free to explore the city. Whereas in the first Bioshock game, you're right off the gate, you are fighting and pretty much for your survival. So I thought that was a really, really interesting and very welcome point in the game. Early on in the game, the first hour or two, you're just this regular person in Colombia, and you're just trying to get to this particular tower or building where this girl Elizabeth is being held. So very welcome addition to the series. But I do, and then once obviously then some things happen and people become hostile to you because this girl Elizabeth, it's supposed to be the heir to this nut job that is running Colombia. In essence, this guy named Comstock is the head of Colombia, and he became like this religious leader, and he created like this religion pretty much where people worship him, and he has some really messed up ideals, like he's almost like a white supremacist, and also a little bit on the extreme side of being religious. So this guy calls himself the prophet, and one of his, I guess, prophecies is that once he's gone from Colombia, his daughter, which is Elizabeth, is gonna take over his place, and she's gonna run over the show. So that's why he wants to protect her, and once he finds out that you're after her, that's when the police of Colombia is after you to stop you from stealing his daughter Elizabeth. And so that's when the enemy, that's when the enemies come into play. I guess the difference between this Bioshock Infinite and the first two entries in the series of the Bioshock franchise is that the first Bioshock dealt a little bit with the ideals of Atlas versus Andrew Ryan, where Andrew Ryan was trying to create this utopian society at the bottom of the ocean, and then the ideals of Atlas were a little bit on the socialist side. And then in Bioshock 2 you had Sophia Lamb, which was Andrew Ryan's rival, and she was a little bit into altruism, and through that she was able to gather a following, and by gathering that following it later became a cult, almost like a religious cult that followed Sophia Lamb, and that's when her followers and ideals clashed with Andrew Ryan's, and that led to her imprisonment in Bioshock 2. So that's one of the things that I like about the Bioshock games. They have this very mature type of storyline that mixes, ideals with, political views and beliefs, and, religious themes, and, mixes, socialism with psychology, with philosophy, and all kinds of things. And Bioshock Infinite takes a little bit on the extreme religious approach. I guess in a way it's similar to Bioshock 2, but Bioshock 2 was more a little bit of about a cult following, whereas in Bioshock Infinite it's already like a defined religion with some really extreme views on, like I said, you know, racism, the supremacy of the white race and whatnot, which at the time, you know, in the early 1900s was still an issue with, you know, within the United States, I guess, unfortunately. But another thing that the game also showcases is the excessive patriotism that the people had, and how that excess in patriotism can lead to, you know, bad things within a society. So I guess that's the message. So I'm really glad that Bioshock Infinite stayed within that very mature and very thoughtful type of you know, type of storyline. And then as the game progresses, some other things come out, like such as, you know, quantum physics. You know, the game starts explaining how, you know, how a city that floats in the sky exists. So the game throws at you some, you know, quantum physics and science topics that, you know, try to explain why the city is up there, and also trying to explain why some of the later events on the game happen. But I'm not going to say those because I don't want to spoil the game. But yeah, that's really cool. I do have to, I do have some critics regarding the game that I'm gonna be saying now, and I don't mean to say them in a really negative way. Like I said, you know, Bioshock Infinite, it's a fantastic game. It's a contender for Game of the Year, but I do have some gripes about the game. The first one is the gameplay and the combat system. The game also, similar to Bioshock 1 and 2, uses what it's called vigors, which is the equivalent to the plasmids that you had in Bioshock 1 and 2. But the problem is, in Bioshock Infinite, the vigors don't have the same predominant role that the plasmids had in the first two entries in the series. You know, as we all know, plasmids were one of the main reasons why Rapture, you know, fell apart. You know, it was the decay of that Rapture society, pretty much, because the plasmids were this things that modified the DNA, you know, the DNA configuration of individuals. So over time they became like this addictive type of drug that, you know, modify your DNA system, and that's why people went crazy, and that's why people went hostile, and they became you know, addicted and fought each other pretty much within Rapture. Whereas in Bioshock Infinite, the vigors, they don't really have a clear-cut explanation, or at least I wasn't able to find a logical way to explain the existence of vigors. Basically, vigors are the same thing as plasmids. You know, you drink a vigor and you have special powers. For example, you know, you're able to throw fire, you know, within the palm of your hand, or shock people with like electrocution. So the enemies in Bioshock Infinite, they don't really use the vigors except for like one enemy, which is kind of stupid because, you know, the city is like, there are vigor bottles everywhere, and you're like pretty much the only individual within the city that makes use of them. So it doesn't really make sense, and the importance of the vigors is not as I guess accentuated as the plasmids in the first two Bioshock games. So it's almost like the developers were like, okay, this is a Bioshock game, we have to throw in, you know, the vigors in. So and the second problem comes, the usage of the vigors in the game are not, it's not really important. And what I mean by that is that a lot of the vigors are similar, and they don't work well. For example, some of the vigors you can use to set up traps. For example, when you get the first vigor in the game, which is the fire one, you can set up a fire trap in the ground, so that enemies that come rushing towards you, when they step on it, they're gonna, you know, light on fire. But I found that a lot of the combat system in Bioshock Infinite works only with your weapons. Like the enemies don't sometimes really come rushing towards you. So you could be setting all these traps and thinking, okay, this guy's gonna come this way and this other guy's gonna come this other way. So I'm gonna lay a trap here and another trap here. But that doesn't happen. I don't know if because the AI was poorly implemented in this game, or I don't know what the deal is or was. But the in Bioshock 1 and 2, the AI works collaborates with you in better ways to make traps with with your plasmids and weapons. And in Bioshock Infinite, that doesn't happen. The AI, it's a little bit dumb, and they're content with just laying back there and just shooting at you and take cover, shoot at you, take cover, and so forth. So a lot of the plasmid usage in the game becomes in a lot of ways useless, especially if you're playing it on normal difficulty, which is what I did. I'm going to start my run on the hardest game mode soon, so maybe the plasmids are going to have a little bit more of significance, or the vigors rather. And another I guess critic that I have against the vigors is that a lot of them, they look the same, or the effects are not as good as the previous Bioshock games. For example, in the original Bioshock, you have like telekinesis to like grab objects, and it's almost like every plasmid that you had in the game had a purpose within the game. Whereas in Bioshock Infinite, they don't really serve a purpose other than just damage the enemy in a different way. So it's like, you have your fire, your electricity, and then you have stuff like things that push the enemy against the walls and stuff like that, but they don't really have that implementation that Bioshock 1 and 2 offered. So that's one of my, I guess, negative things about the game. Another negative thing is the excessive frequency of combat later on in the game. As I was nearing the end of the game, the game just throws at you this ridiculous amount of combat sequences where you have to fight like 10 to 15 enemies at the same time. So you kill all of them, then you move on into the next area, and the same thing happens. 10 or 15 enemies, they're all shooting at you, and it just I don't know, it just didn't feel right. It's almost like the developers were like, you're about to reach the end of the game, so because you're near the end of the game, we're gonna throw you just a bunch of enemies to make the game challenging. But within, it just doesn't feel right within the context of the universe and the context of the game itself. I almost wish the developers would forget a little bit about the challenge. I mean, for a game like Bioshock, where the storyline is the main important thing of the game, because that, in my opinion, that's what Bioshock games are all about. It's about the story mostly, and then the gameplay on the second point of view. So I almost wish the developers would just forget about the challenging parts. Just make a game that it's going to be enjoyable for the player to just to grasp the story of the game, and forget about the challenge. I mean, I'm not saying the game should be a cakewalk, but don't make it ridiculous. Don't just throw hundreds of enemies just because you're near the end of the game, and the game has to be difficult at the end of it. If you want to do that, just throw me like a boss battle, like an individual. But the game doesn't do that. The game just throws you hundreds of enemies, and it's just frustrating, because it takes time to kill all of them. You have to be moving constantly, and so on. And speaking of the combat sequences in the game, this game introduces a new I guess concept using the skylines, which are these rails that float around the Columbia City, and they are used as means of transportation. So you have this hook in your hand where you can grab into the rails, and you can use them as you're fighting enemies. And I have to say, it's a really cool concept and very well executed within the game. I had a lot of fun just grappling myself to the rails and going around the combat arena, if you will, and you can jump off the hook and land on the enemies and perform like this sort of execution type of move. So I had a lot of fun doing that, and I was extremely surprised at how well the game runs when you're in these rails. Because the game you move really fast around the rails and there's no drop in frame rate or anything like that. So I was really impressed with the performance of the game while you're attached to these rail lines, if you will. So very good implementation of that. Back to the one negative thing. That was a positive, the rail thing. But back to another negative thing that I want to bring up. The first two Bioshock games, one thing that I loved about them were the Big Daddies. To me that was just such an important part of the game, just like plasmids were and just like the storyline was. This game doesn't really have a direct equivalent of the Big Daddy. I thought that the Songbird, which is that huge bird that showed up in the trailers of the game and whatnot. I thought he was become like the Big Daddy figure of this game, but he doesn't really do a whole lot. I mean, he appears in a bunch of scenes in the game, but nothing major. And there are these two other enemies. One of them is called the Patriot, which is this like robot that impersonates like some of the like George Washington and some of the Patriots. And he doesn't, in my opinion, he doesn't have the personality, the big or good enough personality to become the next Big Daddy. And there's also this other enemy, I forgot the name, this really mech-like opponent that you fight him a couple times during the game, but again, he doesn't have that same epic, lasting effect that the Big Daddies had in the first two Bioshock games. So I was really disappointed at that, because the enemies in this game feel very generic. It's just more of the same when the game starts all the way up until the end of the game. The enemies are just your regular. They're gonna shoot at you, and some of them use the Vigors. And then you have the Patriots, but it's nothing like, nothing epic like, the Big Daddies were in the first two games. So with that being said, let me see, I covered the story, I covered some of my gripes with the game, and I know this video may sound like a little bit on the negative side, but trust me, Bioshock Infinite, it's a fantastic game. The ending, again, I'm not going to spoil anything, but I'm just going to say that the ending, it's one of those endings that you're not gonna see it coming, and it's a very confusing type of ending that it had me thinking for a couple hours after I beat the game. So that's a really good thing. I'm not really happy with the ending, but in a way, it's really hard to describe the feelings that I had when I beat the game. It's almost like it's not perhaps the ending that I was expecting, but at the same time, it leaves you like thinking about it, which is a good thing. It had an effect on me. So I guess that's a good thing, right? Was it worth the wait? I think so. Was it worth paying $60 to get it on release date? I think so too. This is the type of game that it's gonna drop in price pretty soon, so if you guys are waiting for a price drop, it's completely understandable. But in my opinion, I don't regret spending a lot of money on this game because I really enjoyed it. Even though I already beat it, I beat it in like 2 days. So yeah, I'm looking forward. Another thing that I have to admire about the developers is that they have this season pass DLC bullcrap going on, where if you pay $20, you have access to like extra missions. But I have to say, I'll more than likely pay those $20 so I can get the extra missions, I guess, if you will. Just because the universe of Columbia was so well done. that I really want to go back there and I really want to experience new things. And who knows, maybe they're gonna, they're gonna develop some things about the story even further. So yeah, I guess I'm part of the problem. I'll probably be spending $20 on the season pass DLC. Yeah, Bioshock Infinite, a fantastic game. And one last thing that I want to say, another negative thing, is that the game, the audio logs in this game are very important as far as the story. They really help you understand some of the ongoing things. But I really have to, I really don't like how the developers they hide these audio logs within the game like really well. And I just wish that they were more easily available. And I took my time looking for them in this game, and I think I missed like 5 of them. So I did a pretty good job of gathering most of the audio files in the game. But I'm telling you guys, I looked for them in pretty much every corner, in every possible location in the Columbia City. I took my time to look everywhere. So that could be bothersome to some people, obviously, because the whole looting and looking for the audio files can become frustrating, and it takes time. So I just wish the developers wouldn't hide them or wouldn't do that, because they play a critical role in understanding the story of the game. So that's another gripe that I have with this game. But just to close everything off, a fantastic game. I may or may not do another video, going over what the true ending, or talking about the ending of the game, because the ending is a very long one. It reveals a lot of things, but at the same time it creates a lot of confusion. So I may do another video going over the ending of the game. But overall, Bioshock Infinite, a must-have game. If you have not played the Bioshock series at all, this game includes Bioshock 1 on the disc already, so it's a perfect way to get started within the Bioshock universe. In my opinion, it's Bioshock is probably the best series this generation, in my opinion. The first Bioshock was amazing, the second Bioshock was amazing, and Bioshock Infinite is also amazing. So just to close off the video, how would I rank them? I think the original Bioshock still remains my favorite, and I know a lot of people are probably going to disagree with me. I still think that the Bioshock 2 is my second favorite, and Bioshock Infinite is my third favorite. But just because I have this game at the bottom of the table doesn't mean that it's a bad game. Again, awesome game. Get it. If you enjoy the Bioshock series, you're gonna love this game. So yeah, thank you guys for watching the video. I think it's a long one, but thanks again, and I hope I'll see you next time.